Hello and welcome to Inside Politics. I'm Anastasia Lavrina. Today we turn to France, where concerns over religious intolerance are once again making headlines. The country, long known for its staunch secularism, is facing renewed scrutiny following a violent attack inside a mosque in the Southern Gard region. The killing of a 24-year-old Muslim man has not only sparked grief, but also triggered nationwide protests and calls for accountability. In recent years, accusations of systematic Islamophobia have become louder, with critics pointing to a pattern of policies, rhetoric, and violent incidents that they say marginalize Muslim communities. The latest events have reignited debate over France's approach to secularism and whether it has tipped into exclusion. So what exactly happened and why are so many saying this marks a dangerous tipping point? Let's begin with what we know so far.
Hundreds of people have gathered in Paris's Republic Square to condemn what they see as a rising tide of Islamophobia in France. The demonstration was held in memory of 24-year-old Aboubakar, who was fatally stabbed during a violent attack inside a mosque in the Gard region. The protest was initiated by Antoine Léaument, a member of parliament from France, Unbowed, who called for a public show of solidarity. He urged citizens to take a stand against religious hate, stressing that no one should be targeted because of their faith. Aboubakar was killed inside Hatis Mosque in the town of Grand-Combe. According to witnesses and local reports, the attacker stabbed the victim multiple times, shouted anti-Islamic slurs during the assault, and even filmed the act on a mobile phone. The incident has shaken the local Muslim community and drawn wider national attention. Alice Public Prosecutor Abdelkrim Grini confirmed that investigators are examining the possibility of an Islamophobic motive. While France's National Anti-Terrorist Prosecutor's Office is monitoring the case, it has not yet assumed control. Authorities say Aboubakar was a familiar face at the Trescol mosque, located in a nearby hamlet. In contrast, the suspect appears to be a stranger to the community. Surveillance footage from within and around the mosque has captured images of the alleged perpetrator, whose identity remains unconfirmed. The killing has reignited debate over religious intolerance, public safety, and whether France is doing enough to protect its Muslim citizens from targeted violence.
So we can see that there are more questions than answers. And joining me now to discuss this in depth is writer and political analyst in Paris, Abdunnour Toumi. Mr. Toumi, warm welcome to Inside Politics. And let me start with a question. Why do you think France failed to call this a terror attack when the motive seems religiously motivated?
Good evening, and thank you for having me on the program. Actually, this horrible act that took place in the southern city of Grand-Combe in the Gard region in France, actually that region in the south of France, southeast, is the bastion of the far-right party, and notably the RN party. But what is interesting here, in that tiny town, small town in this Grand-Combe, the mayor is a communist. So just to make this discussion become, clearly observed. So, but now, as far as the discourse that has been, the anti-Muslim discourse that has been going on lately, I would say it has reached a term of banalization. And this is because of the far-right media the far-right politician leaders, and lately, especially in the last 6 months or so, was I would say, the selling point of the Interior Minister, Mr. Bruno Retailleau, who is actually positioning himself as the face of the right. I mean, what he called it, the classic right, that is very, I mean, he's showing some muscles and acting as if like tough cop. But on the other hand, he is endangering all the existence of the Muslim community in France that has been living here for centuries. And France actually didn't discover France in the last 30 or 40 or 50 years. I mean, it has a relation with the Muslims that goes back to the 13th century. So I'm not going that far, but there is an interesting element in here. There is a time where the nature of racism or race has been moved actually from its, I would say, ethnical character into a religious one. And this started exactly in 1989. At that time, I mean, it's known here in France, the so-called the Islamic headscarf of when then in 1989, two sisters with Moroccan descent showed up to their junior high with the headscarf. At that moment, it was a turning point about the relation between race and religion here in France.
Mr. Toumé, I'm very sorry, but can we conclude, coming back to what we see today in France, can we say that if the victim wasn't a Muslim, there will be another reaction from the governmental institutions?
Actually, I was going to arrive to that point. I mean, that for sure, because I mean, it took 2 days from the Interior Minister, in which he is not only the Interior Minister, but also he is the Religious Affairs Minister. So he didn't actually show up until 48 hours after this terrible act. And then he didn't even actually dare to go to meet with the leaders of the Muslim community, the local Muslim community, at least in the mosque. He met them at actually just above the city hall, like an administrative position. But I mean, to sum up this, yes, I mean, if it was actually this horrific act happened to another ethnic or religious group or member, it would have been another story.
Mr. Toumé, but isn't it possible that this attack was an isolated act rather than evidence of systemic Islamophobia in France?
Actually, I'm not legal expert or criminal lawyer on criminology, but it makes some sense. It is an isolated act, but this isolated act was fed up by this discourse that I went through that has been going on in the national media. I mean, day in, day out. I mean, Muslims, Arabs, Muslims, and so this, what made this criminal to show up to the mosque and stop this, the victim, Mr. Aboubakar Sisi, for more than 50 scabs. So this is stuff which is unbelievable. But this, again, is because of the, as I said, because of the banalization of this heinous discourse in which now has become, I would say normal to some extent, but it has been banalized by the far-right media and politicians because, I mean, now they are looking at the Muslims are the boogeyman, are the cause of the French malaise that France has been going through in the last 2 decades.
But again, continues the topic of the situation in different institutions in France. Is the government, is the France in denial about the scale of Islamophobia within its institutions?
It's very interesting. Actually, even the interior minister, he didn't dare to use the term of Islamophobia or Islamophobic. Arguing that it's the label that is used by the Iranian regime and the brotherhoods in Europe. Whereas it's very interesting, go back to history. Actually, the term of Islamophobia was created or was used first time in 1910 in Algeria, in an occupied, colonized Algeria by French lawyer who did actually made or wrote a report about the injustice that the Algerian indigenous were going through the French colonial policies. So he actually, the interior minister, he didn't want to use this. He qualified it as an anti-Muslim act, but which is very interesting, there is a sense of Islamophobic here in France. I'm not saying in entire France or the large majority of the French people. No, to some extent one has to be fair. Actually, there are some writers among the French white who are actually going, supporting and showing full support for the Muslims and going after the policies of this interior minister who is actually using the Muslims as, again, as I said, the origin of the French malaise. And very interesting, this term used to be used by Jean-Marie Le Pen, the father of Marine Le Pen, the leader of the RN party, who is now on the lead in French politics. And this is why, there is kind of an intra-politics between the far right and the so-called right, which is, there is no right anymore in France. There is a far right and far, far, far right. So, and this Bruno Retailleau is again trying to position himself to be, as I said, the leader of the right, and on the one hand, and on the other hand, trying to seduce the RN party voters for his own
Mr. Toomey, it's clear that the political parties time to time are doing some mistakes and trying to propose different solutions to the existing problems as they're competing to each other. But can the state itself still claim neutrality when Muslim lives receive muted responses?
Actually, again, there are laws to protect the Muslims and all the other religions. And again, there is an interesting element in this equation, actually, in these complex equations. It calls laicity or secularism. But the far right, actually, by the way, the laicity one, the law of laicity, when it was established in 1905, is to protect the community, the minorities, and all the religions. Whereas now the far right, and to some extent even the Macron administration, he used this actually laicity, term of laicity, and laicity now in France, especially in the discourse of the far right and the right and the conservative here in France, is the religion of state. It's sacred. Nobody has to touch this laicity. But it's ironic because laicity has to protect the minorities and all the religions. Nonetheless, now the laicity, according to them, to the right and the far right, media and experts and politicians and so on, they are using it as an argument anti-Muslim social behavior because their point is they are calling for what they call it assimilation. Not even integration, it's assimilation, meaning by that one has to leave his appearance, Islamic appearance, at home. And by the way, I mean, there is even a law that was passed 2 or 3 years ago by Interior Minister then Gérald Darmanin, and under the President Macron administration, what they called it, the law to enhance the values of the Republic, as if the Muslims are not actually respecting the Republic, whereas, or to the contrary, it's false, because the Muslims in France here are well integrated, some of them are well assimilated, and what they are actually, they work very hard, they are struggling like their fellow citizens, and even the resident, I mean the legal residents, are also working very hard and trying to make their life better for them and for their children, and looking for a better opportunity. And yet, again, the far-right media, the politicians, and some now, like the Interior Minister, is targeting them and is even questioning their, let's say, their friendship. I mean, they are not French enough, because the Interior Minister, I mean, once he called them the French of paper. I mean, in French we say les Français de papier. So that means they are not trusted, and they are not loyal to the Republic.
Mr. Tomé, but overall, how media has reported on the case?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Mr. Tomé, overall, how media reported about the case itself?
Actually, very interesting. I mean, the media didn't report, I mean, it kind of was briefly until the Muslim, I mean, but going back to the case of the Grand-Combe of Aboubakar Sisi. Yeah?
Right, yes, the recent cases which actually attracted
media,
a lot of attention. Please.
Yeah, the media, they just went through quickly, but it was inflamed on social media, and this is what made the Interior Minister to react 48 hours. And also there is the courage and the braveness of the political party, it calls in France LFI, or the France Unbowed. I mean, all the MPs and leaders I mean, took the stage, and they were very active on social media and showing full support for the Muslim community. And this is why it brought to have this march that took place last week, and in practically the entire big French cities, and from south,
indeed,
east,
we can
west,
see it
center,
even now on the screen. We could see the march and the demonstrations on the streets in France. But don't you think that the process like this sometimes politicizing personal tragedies rather than pushing for a real reform?
Actually, the term politicizing, it's not used by the Muslim community. I mean, and by the way, unfortunately, the Muslim community, when we speak about the Muslim community, one has to put it in the plural, because they are not that coherent. And there are Muslim communities, because we saw the North African, the Algerian, Moroccan, Tunisian community, the Sub-Saharan communities, the Turkish community, and so on. But on this tragic event, it did bring them all together, and to show their strength, and also to speak out and have a say in this political context that is poisoning the political debate, because the right and the far right, and even the moderate left, they are bankrupt. I mean, they have nothing to offer. Actually, France is going through a terrible economic situation. It's still in political crisis. But the question is, on the media, is all about the Muslims and whether are well integrated or not.
So we don't have much of the time, but I would like to still ask one more question. Is France heading towards institutionalized religious discrimination?
No, I don't think so, because there are actually solid resistance, and who are, for instance, these leaders of the LFE, and there are even some scholars and thinkers who are writing and speaking up about this. And also the large majority of the French people are against it. I mean, when it comes to the Muslims, I mean, they are targeted, yes, they are actually to some extent suffering from racism, like in looking for job, I mean, housing, and actually they are struggling. But there are laws who are protecting them. And the French, not the entire French establishment who is an anti-Muslim right now, or even in the future. But the context is also very boiling and following, in the aftermath of the carnage is taking place in Gaza. And this is what has poisoned totally the debate about religion here in France. Nonetheless, the term of knowing that France has a kind of complex, an anti-tier complex when it comes to religion.
But again, I would like to know your opinion. Do you see that the political elites complicit in normalizing anti-Muslim rhetoric?
Yeah, as I just said, the elite, yes, the far-right elite and some of the right elite, yes, they are helping. They are actually adding the fuel to this toxic debate. And this is why actually one has to step up. And actually the Muslims, the Muslim community, the Muslim community leaders have to show up strongly and don't be shy and to speak about their right, and also go and challenge those politicians in the polls.
But could constant claims of Islamophobia make it harder to have honest conversations about integration within the society?
Yes, because this process has been going through for the last 4 decades. It's not new. But what made it new lately, or what has made it actually public lately, is because of the media and the politicians, especially the right and the far-right leaders. And actually it started with Nicolas Sarkozy in 2007 when he brought the issue of national identity to the national debate.
National identity, when it comes to the discrimination, Islamophobia or something else, it doesn't relate and doesn't affect only the Muslim society. There are also other groups who are trying to bring more attention to that. But in case with France, why are Muslim communities often left to protect alone?
Actually, this is, as I said, there is this complex, and France has, for the Republic and the establishment, now has this problem with its colonial past, this colonial, horrible time. And this is why, as I said earlier, the equation of race or racism here in France has moved from its ethnic character to the religious one, because at that time they were talking about the Arabs, and of course when they talk about the Arabs, they talk about the Algerians, and now and after, as I said, the headscarf of these two young ladies, who are moms now, it was almost 37 years ago. And also there are some geopolitical events that has shaped this toxic issue when it comes to religion and politics, and politics and race here in France.
Well, so we can say that the colonial past of France, even though some people are migrated to France from the African continent, let's say more than 100 years ago, still affect the decision made by the policymakers in the 21st century.
Actually, this is because of the mentality, and this is why, like, for instance, I mean, Algeria, has gotten its sovereignty 62 years ago, but today we are still talking about Algeria and French political debate. And by the way, I mean, there is these tensions, I mean, ongoing diplomatic tensions between Algeria and France. This is because of the, especially the right and the far-right party who has this heritage of colonialism, and this is, brings us to the state of denial of those colonizer who has, her grandfather did, colonize those countries, the Maghreb countries, the sub-Saharan countries, terribly, and it was a harsh occupation, and not only occupation, but a process of acculturation as well. This is why today and nowadays these leaders, the media of the far right, when they speak, the first thing they go through or they go to is about assimilation, meaning by that is a process of acculturation.
Yes, indeed, there's a real tough situation in between of France and Algeria. But how do you think, what needs to change?
Actually, what needs to change? First of all, as I said, the Muslim community or the Muslim community leaders, have to show up strongly and don't be shy and to challenge those politicians, and also the Muslims. The young and there are about 6 million to 7 million Muslims, and who are well integrated. Who are also an economic power, a socio-economic power, and they have a say, and they can make this change. And because now they feel they are targeted, and they feel they are not actually. Their parents, were marginalized and suffered of racism and so on. But this is why their children today are speaking up, and they are challenging the politicians, and also they are to some extent creating even, maybe the term is strong, but it is to some extent some lobbying and to be in this equation of race and politics in France.
Well, Mr. Toumier, thank you so much for joining our program tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all for this edition of Inside Politics. Tonight's story reflects a deeper reckoning about identity, faith, and the French Republic's promise of equality. As anger spills into the streets, the question remains, can France confront the mirror without looking away? I'm Anastasia Lavrina. See you next time.